Hello, hello. I'm coming to you live from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and welcome to the Law Firm Blueprint. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane. With me, as always, my man Seth Price down there in DC, Maryland, Virginia, with Price Benowitz as well as BluShark Digital. But we are joined today by a very special guest. Seth, tell us who we got.
We got Chad Dudley, maybe one of the smartest guys in our space. It hurts when I talk to him. Founder of this juggernaut firm, and in the
By the
in
way, as of right now, the Law Firm Blueprint is Jay and Chad Dudley. Seth, see you later. Why am I talking to you? We got the smart guy here.
we do, and Humble, the guy who built Dudley DeBosier, acquired CJ Advertising, and now has the law firm Accelerator. Welcome, Chad. Thrilled to have you here.
But thanks for having me. It's very kind words. Very,
Look,
very kind.
Chad, you have not only built something yourself, which we both know is Jay and I both know is not easy, but have sort of gone inside of more PI law firms specifically and looked at all the mishigas, all the stuff going on. If you could distill all of your hours of agita looking at the nonsense, what are some of the takeaways that you see that the mortals like us that create law firms are doing that we probably shouldn't be doing?
That you're doing that you shouldn't be doing. I think.
Like, what do you when you open the Komodo and you look at what's
Sure.
going on, what are you finding that you're just like, this is nonsense, and if people weren't doing these things, they'd be making a lot more money?
Well, there's a short answer. There's a long answer. I'm going to start with the short answer. The short answer is that there's a lot of firms that want to run before they walk. Um, they want to hear about the latest in technology. They want to use the hottest vendor that's currently out there. They want to get on the best software, all this kind of stuff, right? And those are all good things, and you should stay on top of all whatever's out there. But you should also take care of the basics, right? I work with these firms, and they want to apply 20 different things, but I'm like, do you call your clients frequently? Do you measure it? Do you have meaningful interactions with them? Are you identifying your best cases? Are you getting demand letters on time? Are you not negotiating too long? Are all the blocking and tackling things that firms need to do? Are you doing those things at a very high level? Because you have total control over them. You don't need super crazy high technology to execute. And if you're not doing those things, it's it's great they're using AI to get your demand letters out, but that's that comes along after. And I think that what I see with firms is that they want to just fall in love with the technology, the service, even consultants, uh, and they need to just you don't need to do 100 things. You need to do like the 3 to 5 things that are right for your firm at this time for the firm you're trying to build with the resources you have. And that's the challenge, right? The challenge is not finding 100 things that will make your firm better. That's easy. It's what are the 3 to 5 things that really matter to your firm right now.
And
So simplify it.
crowdsourcing, understood. And crowdsourcing your experience, right? Because not
Oh
only
my gosh. Yes.
no, looking at the 3 to 5 things, between CJ and Accelerate and your prior iterations of consulting, you have seen a lot of firms, and I get it, right? If you don't answer the phone, I was just on a webinar today. If you don't answer the phone, what good is it? One of the things we pushed for early on as you were growing was just touches per month. What do you see as the 3 to 5 things that law firms, forget about everything else. These are the things that, not that you shouldn't have software and you shouldn't do these things, but what are the
Yeah.
3 to 5 things that, ignore at your peril?
Well, the first thing I always ask with firms when I get called in to work with the firm, I go, what are you trying to build? Because there's a bunch of different successful firms and they look wildly different. And I've worked with all kinds. I only work with personal injury firms, but I've worked with all kinds of personal injury firms. And are you trying to build a multi-state juggernaut that signs up, thousands of cases a month? Okay, you can go down that path, and there's a way to do that. Do you want to be a solo practitioner? And you only take a small amount of potentially high value cases. Okay, there's a way to do that. Are you something in between? Do you want a handful of attorneys? Are you trying to be, regional, statewide, citywide? What are you trying to build? And you have to start there because there's different strategies for depending on what direction you're going. Are you going to be a referred out firm where you generate leads and just send the bulk of them out? Are you going to mass torts? Are you going to be like a hybrid? So I need to know what the firm is trying to build. And based on what they're trying to build, I then go into, let's do an assessment. I always, compare it to, if we're doing a cross country trip, going from LA to Miami, I need to know where's your ultimate destination. Is it Miami? Okay, cool. I know where that is. Well, the next thing you need to know is where you're starting from, because the path, if you're going to Miami from LA, that's one path. If you're going to Miami from Chicago, that's a different strategy. And so I need to know. So I ask the firm where they want to go. The next thing I do is assess where they're at. What are the resources? What are the assets that they have? And so I'll do a pretty thorough assessment, look at the numbers, look at the KPI, the key performance indicators, and gather a lot of information. And I go, all right, you've told me what you want to be. I can tell you what you are, and let's bridge the gap. Let's talk about what is the most efficient way to get there. And so, to answer your question, what are some of the big things that firms don't get right? One of the things that is shocking that they don't get right is they don't take the time to sit down and go, what am I trying to build? Like, what am I doing all this for? And when you don't know what you're trying to build and you don't know where you're trying to get to, everything is a shiny object. Everything sounds good. You're going all over the place and you're super inefficient. When you know what you want, it allows you to say no to certain things. It allows you to zero in on certain things. It allows you to make better decisions. And so those two things, where are you going? Where, and a really honest assessment of where you're at is important. Firms want to sometimes say they want to build a really great litigation firm. And as we sit here today, the attorneys that they have on board haven't tried any cases. Well, you got to close that gap somehow, but you got to close that gap. You got to be honest with where you're at. It doesn't mean you can't get there. It doesn't mean that there's ways to get there. It's just, it's different depending on where you're currently starting from. And so that's where I usually start. Once I do the assessment, I'll pick, again, I'll have conversations with the owners of the firms. We'll pick 3 to 5 things that we're going to focus on. What happens is, Seth, in running a firm, you say, you know what, sounds like a great idea, A, B, and C. And then you kind of get into it and you have to course correct a little bit. They say, every plan is perfect until the first shot is fired. Every quarterly planning session is perfect until you actually get to work and have to execute. I think Mike Tyson probably said it better. Every fighter has a plan until he gets punched in the nose, right? And we all get punched in the nose a lot. And you got to adapt, but it's easier to adapt if you have a plan versus just winging it.
Jay?
So, Chad, what I want to talk to you about is you've been able to talk to a lot of high impact players in the personal injury market. And it sounds to me like that first part of the conversation is really somewhat therapeutic in that, like, what do you really want? But do you often find that lawyers are kind of lying to themselves and it takes you a little while to get them to truly be honest about what they want? Because, hey, at my point, I want to do certain things, but if you really get down to it, yeah, my heart's not in it. I love the idea of it. Yeah. And I can but it's almost like you kind of need like 60 or 90 days of actual therapy before you can really get to where you got to go. So talk to me about how that, like, unpacking that can happen.
That's great.
Because our listeners, are struggling with that. They see the grass is greener, and my response to them is, yeah, the grass may be greener, but there's dirt under every grass. We got to get through the dirt first, right? And it's really hard for people who don't have a coach like you to really have those sort of honest conversations because they don't have somebody pushing back. But how do you push back against that and say, is this really what you want? Like, really? Really?
That's a great question. And, I grew up playing competitive tennis. I played at national level, international, and then played Division I in college. And so the question you always ask yourself, like when you're growing up, I want to be a professional tennis player. And a lot of people said it. The question is, who's going to do the stuff it takes, right? Who's going to put in the hours, the practice, the discipline, all those things to back up what they want to be with the stuff that it takes to get there. And it's very similar, just you hit the nail on the head. And really in every industry, everything they do. Look at people that are really great at what they're doing. They had a vision for what they wanted to be, but they also backed it up with massive action, right? And yeah, there is some of that, right? I think the take for example, right now, and it's cooled off a little bit, but there's still a good bit. You got a lot of attorneys. Hey, I'm gonna get involved and get cases off of social media, right? And I'm gonna, I've seen people get on social media and generate cases, and I want to be one of those guys. And so saying that without understanding what it takes, I mean, they know these guys have like, an army of video editors. They're shooting 20 to 30 hours of content a week. They're not, it's a lifestyle. It's
And
not
they're
a
putting
hobby.
themselves on camera.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, if you don't like that, if that's not like breathing to you, that's not the strategy I'm going to pick for you, right? Because you're not being honest with your own strengths, weaknesses. Good to great is like the hedgehog concept, right? It's what do you have the chance of being great at, right? What do you enjoy doing, and what makes money? And I think owners, when that's kind of the next step in the conversation, is going, okay, that's great that you want to build this type of firm. Personally, and I go through like the 5 pillars, and I'll go like, how do you get cases in the door? How does a firm manage its money, right? How do you run the back office? How do you run the delivery of legal services? And then how do you, manage your talent, right? So I take those 5 things and I go, all right, law firm owner, you want to build this type of firm. In order to build that type of firm, you need to cover these bases in a certain way. And I hate, then when these guys will go, I hate HR and I hate all the back office operational stuff. I'm like, okay, you got to get someone to cover those bases that really can be the best at it, generates the firm money, and they wake up thinking, I love doing this. I can't believe I get paid to do this, right? And so we get into those conversations, and you can the biggest asset is the owners that are self-aware, right? Who's the philosopher that says, you know what, the key is not to fool yourself. The problem is you're the easiest person to fool, right? And
Yeah.
you don't want to. It's so hard because we really have to do some digging. Going, man, I'm not great at that, and I need to like let go of that. When you're starting off your firm, you wear a bunch of different hats. You do everything because you just have to. It's part of it. You make the coffee, you fix the computers, you negotiate cases, you handle marketing. That's everyone's journey. As you get bigger, you got to let go of the things that you, again, you're not good at, and you got to be super honest with yourself that, man, you know what, who's killing the culture? I am. Who's like not making us the best litigating firm? And you have to adapt and gravitate towards your strengths. We always say, look, we built our firm on us maximizing our strengths, my partners and I maximizing our strengths, not trying to fix our weaknesses. Now we try to minimize the damage that our weaknesses do, but you know what? My weaknesses are never going to be my strengths. And so zero in on the things that you're like, I can be great at this. It makes a firm money, and I love doing it. And make that your shot. Again, back to the tennis reference. The top players never got great by making their backhand their weapon when it wasn't their weapon. It was like, I got the biggest serve. I'm going to build my whole game around that, and that's going to be my style. Firms, key people at your firm are very similar. Maximize their strengths. And back to the question that you brought up, yes, there's a lot of that goes on. That goes, I want to be this, I want to do that, and you kind of get down the path. You're like, you know what? Now that I see it, I think I'm going to gravitate more towards this because that suits my personality. It suits the assets that we have. I think we can be great in this section. And I've seen firms just like talking about like sub markets of DMAs doing great, making a killing. They start off wanting to conquer the world, and then they go, you know what? I'm just going to carve out this niche, and I like this. I like this fits the life I want to build. This fits the firm that I want to build. This is who I am, and vice versa. I've seen guys that were intimidated by growing a monster practice, and they kind of get into it, and they're like, okay, a lot of the things that I thought were going to be terrible aren't that bad, and I think I can fix them. Let's keep growing this thing, and it grows like that. So yes, we start off with asking those questions, but ultimately you got to the rubber has to meet the road, and you got to continue to be honest with yourself to figure out, is this the right firm that you want to build?
Jay and I have been sort of meeting with, we talked to different coaches in this during the series, and Jay sort of brought up, exactly what you talked about. It's knowing what you actually want. You want to be a solo and you want to have great litigation cases versus you want to expand. How do you think somebody should go about? And in the last 5 years, the proliferation of coaching has become tremendous. How does one
Yeah.
go and evaluate first what's, legit, and then secondly, what's right for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is crazy because I think, gosh, I've been doing this for 15 or 16 years. And I started off with Tim Mackey, who you know real well with Vista, and we started Vista Consulting, and there's nobody out there. There's maybe like Atticus. There's like a few. There's guys that did consulting for law firms, and those guys are great, by the way. And I think, um, but it was really sparse. And I think we kind of got rolling, and then Ken Harson at Pilma got rolling, and then almost like it wasn't until almost like a decade later, right? All you just saw this proliferation of seminars and coaches and they're all over the place, which I think is a good thing. I think we got a lot of smart people out there. There's a lot of people that are doing just some really great stuff, and I think it's good for our industry. I think what we do as personal injury attorneys it's a noble profession, despite what some people might say. I believe in what we do. I think that we generally provide a much needed service to people that are in need, and I I I love working with planning firms. I love meeting people. I love every part of it. And there are a bunch of good coaches out there, great coaches out there. I think the biggest thing is going, look, find out who do you gel with? Like who do you gotta, if you're gonna be spending a chunk of time, you're gonna have a bunch of conversations, you gotta connect with the coach. Like if you don't like hanging around the coach, just because for whatever reason, that ain't the coach for you. And I think the other thing is, just going, does this person know what they're doing? Because I think that I would put, if you look at some of the coaches out there, you have um, not like generic coaches. There are people that will coach you at a very generic level, and those guys can be good, and they can come from different industries, and they can bring some outside insight. Like what I mean by that is the basics of annual strategic planning, quarterly rocks, execution. There's some basic things that apply across all industries and can help almost all firms, right? And that's one style of coach. Then you got like an industry expert who's like, hey, they know this industry. They've worked with firms that have been or are at where you're trying to go. They know the path to get there. They've led other people down that path. And in addition, and that's awesome. Now the sweet spot is if you get someone that kind of has disciplines in both. They know the mechanics of it, and they also have the industry insight. I think that's a sweet spot, and those are things. The other thing is that what I've learned, and it's another long trip, was that when I finished playing college tennis, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go teach tennis for 2 years. And you'd be surprised. Being a high level tennis player does not make you a high level tennis coach. They're two. It gives you a great shot at it. It gives you a leg up. There's no doubt about it. But back to the analogy is a coach, my job is not to go point out the 100 things that you're doing wrong as a firm or the 100 things that will make your firm better. The art, because like if I was teaching someone tennis, there's things that I do that are like breathing to me because I've done it forever. And if I just tell you all the things that are going through my head when I watch you hit a forehand, it's going to be overwhelming to you, and you're going to get frustrated, and you're going to go, Chad's a terrible tennis coach. And so my job is to make it simple and to get you to focus on three things, right? And let's just work on those things. Then we kind of progress. And I think that's where good coaches really, that's one of the places they shine, is that they can cut out the noise, because all your clients, when you're in our space, I read this book, I went to this conference, and I found this list of 100 things that are great ideas. Chad, let's do all of them. And they are all great ideas, and they're all would be great for your firm. But you can't do all 100, and we got to narrow it down to 3. So that's part of the thing that you're looking for in a coach. Do they have the ability to do that? Do they have the history of doing that? Those are all important, and but those are some
It's
things you
so,
should look at.
Chad, it's so funny you say this because for a guy who took up tennis about 7 years ago and trying to get from a 3.5 to a 4, my coach does exactly this. If I give him everything at once, he's gonna get nothing. But if I try to get like these 2 things into his forehand, it like actually might move the needle. So
Yeah,
I get it. When it comes to law firms, one of the criticisms of certain coaching is that while the facts may be right, what they're telling you is factually correct. And these are business best practices, right? Because it doesn't take a lot to open a book to do this. The question is how, just like the tennis coaches you're saying, how are you going to get somebody to actually implement? You can tell somebody all you want, you got to answer the phones, but unless there's somebody there who's looking and saying, well, are you listening to the recorded calls? Well, you don't have time for it. We're going to make sure somebody is doing that. There's a certain amount of sort of interference that if you just give best business practice at the highest level, it sounds good and you're going to know more than the person they're going to hire you, but it's not going to move the ball forward nearly as much as if you're there to say, hey, you're not taking the racket back far enough. And if you
yeah,
don't, it's not going to happen.
yeah. Again, keep with this. The analogy is that if if the only time you're playing tennis is during our lesson, then you're not going
Right.
to get great fast, right? The goal is if we spend that time, we hit the highlights, we correct some stuff, we discuss it, but then in between, you got to put in the repetition, you got to put in the work, and you got to do those things. And and I tell firms on the front end, going, look, I don't do any contracts. It's month to month. I ask them to commit for usually a quarter at a time, just to for planning purposes only, just to plan my schedule. But I'm like, look, if this ain't a good fit for you, you can stop at any time. But also, say, if it's not a good fit for me, I'm also going to do the same thing. Like, wait, what? You might fire me? I'm like, what I mean by that is this is work. There's no silver bullet. There's no easy. And if someone else said it, this is not my quote, but another consultant said it, is if I start caring about the success of your firm more than you do, I'm out.
Well, Jay, before you go, I got one follow-up to that, which is
Yeah.
okay, but you've done this primarily on a one-on-one basis. Yes, you have your Accelerate your firm
Yeah.
seminar coming up in Vegas, but generally, can this be done at scale? When you see organizations, how can you take the large number of people, the coaching agencies want to make money? How do you take the numbers and then bring it down to something where there's accountability and follow through?
Yeah, for a very few select firms, like usually what I'll do is if I'm coaching or Mickey Love is coaching, we are working with either the owners or sometimes their executive team, and we'll have meetings like one-offs with the attorneys or legal assistants or case managers or different people, but most of the time we're working with the owners and the executive team, and those are good. And there's been select situations where people are like, look, we want full on support, and in addition to Mickey and myself, we have 2 attorneys, 2 case managers, operations people, marketing people that will kind of all come in collectively and really try to make things happen quickly. Because one of the concerns is, well, is this going to put extra work on my top people's plate? And the answer is, well, in theory, the things that we're working on are the most important things at the firm. And yeah, it's tough, but they should carve out time for this. There's other parts of it that it does help to have. That's why we came up with the name of the company, Accelerators, that we believe that, we put them on there and we'll get you there quicker, right? Grow fast, grow smart. And so we'll do that, and we do different sort of arrangement with that. Those are in those situations we do ask for longer term commitments because we're putting a full team behind what we're doing to make it happen, and we're confident in the results. It just takes time.
So Chad, I got a question for you.
Sure.
I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the majority of people that you work with are coming from established PI firm. People don't call you up and say, I want to start a firm. How do I do it the right way? So you're dealing with people who've got an existing practice and now they want to make it better, right?
Not, believe it or not, not totally.
Oh, okay.
So, again, I've gotten to work with some really amazing firms. And one of the things I'll say is that from the absolute best, largest, most profitable, successful firm I've ever worked with to the least successful, I've learned something from every single firm. And I go in there with that mentality. So I'm always looking.
So the question I have for you is, how do you help owners deal with change management in that they've come to you, they want to get things right and going in a particular direction, but sometimes they have legacy employees, legacy systems, people who've been with them for a decade or more who haven't necessarily bought into the changes that the owner has. And how do you help them overcome that? Because I hear, from people that are in audience, they're saying, I've had, Bill or Patsy, my paralegal, who's been with me since it was just me. Now I want to be a better business person. I've never been a better business person. I've never focused on these things. And now I'm asking them to pay attention to details they've never had to pay attention to, do things in a systemic way that they've never had to do. How do you help people overcome that? Because that would seem to be a huge challenge, because you're not just focusing on the owner who's being coached, but you have to help them coach their people, because you can't interact with everybody at a firm every day like they are.
Yeah. Another great question. So the first thing, and it's why it's part of the assessment, is understanding like what's the dynamic that you're entering. And there's a great book. It's called The First 90 Days. It's a Harvard Business Review book. It is a fantastic book. It's got so much great stuff in it. One of the concepts in there that is really good is it talks about what sort of stage or life, or what phase is a business in, but it applies to law firms, and they call it stars. And stars. Is it in a startup? Is it in a turnaround? Is it accelerated growth? Is it realignment or sustaining success, right? And so I've used that concept because it is different, and there's so much, it's a different dynamic. So startup, usually for applying it to our practice, I would say that startups, a firm that's less than 3 years old. A turnaround, I would categorize a firm that's making less than 5% profit year over year. Accelerated growth, this is a firm that's typically growing in excess of 50% year over year, like crazy growth. And those are firms that are usually smaller, they're less than 10 million. They can see some crazy growth numbers, but sometimes you spot those in higher numbers where they're just growing rapidly. Realignment, typically firms are somewhere between 5% net profit to 20ish, where all right, they're profitable, but they can do better. And then I say up to 25%. And then the sustaining success with the firms are like, they're doing great, they're doing awesome, and they're just trying to continue to grow. And that's usually 25% net profit year over year. And I can talk about, when I say net profit, what I mean by that. And that's a whole nother conversation, but those are some general guidelines. And the reason I bring that up is that if I go into a firm and it's a startup or turnaround, I call that, you're hunting. You are, every day you go leave the cave, you got to go kill something and bring it back, or people don't eat. I mean, and it's a different environment. So you're operating quick. And to answer your question, if I'm in one of those firms, I've been called in startups, I've been called in for turnarounds. If you go into that situation, like, we got to move quick. There's a lot at stake every single day. If we don't make things happen, people get fired, and it's a different environment. There's less patience. There's less, and it's just, that's the environment. Now, when you get into a realignment or sustaining success, especially sustaining success firms, well, you can, not that you're still doing the stuff. You just have more time to do it. And your first rule is do no harm, right? If you have a sustaining success firm, you don't want to, you can make changes, but they usually have the right people in place. They got a good team, and they're just trying to get better. Those are the firms that you're they're running a 4-minute mile and you're trying to shave a second off, right? And you're trying to, it's a different mentality. And there you first seek to understand. So if the first one is hunting, this is like growing crops. You have time, you can be patient, and that changes how you deal with the people within the organization, right? Where way more patience, chill out. You have time to develop leaders. You have time to, work with them. Startup and turnarounds, like you got to move quick, and there's less patience. And accelerated growth, you're trying to slow things down a little bit. Everyone feels like their hair's on fire, and things are breaking every day. I always say, all the systems and processes you put in place, a lot of them break every time you double from 10 to 20 employees to 20 to 40, 40 to 80. And, a lot of firms get stuck in that 40 to 80 employee stuff, and they kind of turn back. We talked about, what do you want to be? A lot of them hit that milestone and go, what I thought I wanted to be, I don't want. I'm going to head back this way. And I hope, does that answer your question? Like, it's just a different style depending on where the firm is at, and that's why I need to know. I don't get, firms will come in and they'll say, hey, look, Chad, can you just look at our intake? I'm like, I will, but I need to know this stuff. And I do the assessment anyways, because, I early on in my career, I would be looking at intake, and the vibe was so different. Like, and I'm like, what's going on? Oh, we can't make payroll. Oh, that's why you want me to look at intake. Well, let's just look at the whole thing, because I can't solve this one piece without understanding the environment that I'm working in.
Chad, this is awesome. Like you've made a big impact on my firm, on me personally. I think we have not scratched the surface of Chad Dudley here. I would love to have you back when you start going into the fact that, and part of your consulting philosophy is, there's so much gold within firms, within cases, that the average firm is just barely scratching the surface on. It is something that, just like Mickey's talks on dashboards and KPIs, it took me about 4 years of listening to it before I could start actually implementing it.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I have moved far along on that journey. Would not be there but for you guys.
Thank you. Very kind.
Yeah, this has been great for me. I already texted my assistant and told her to get me that book. So
there you go. Yes.
Like I'm down here. You can't see my fingers furiously going, and I'm trying to be a touch typer and get it in on my phone. So thank you so much for being with us.
Right. So we got a conference coming up in Vegas in a few months.
Yes.
We got a book coming
tell us about that.
Lots of exciting stuff. So when the book comes out, let's have you back on to talk about the book.
Yeah. Well, the book's coming out. It's called the Dudley Disciplines. It's it's 10 disciplines that you guys can implement at your firm. It's just from working with firms all over, throughout the years, big firms, little firms. What are the 10 things that I see they get right? And it's
basically the Jim Collins, the good to great of law.
I hope so. I hope that's what it turns out to be, but that's what it is. And looking forward to get that out. And then with Accelerator, we're putting on a conference, and we're, again, how to continue to grow your firm and how to continue to make your firm better. Lawfirmaccelerator.com is where you can get more information regarding the things that we're putting on there. And in addition to that, if you go to lawfirmaccelerator.com, you could sign up for the Dudley DeBosier bookshelf, which is all the books that I read. I love reading. I take notes, and you get my notes. So the book I just mentioned, the first 90 days, there's my cheat sheet. Now it's a lot, but you can just go there, download the cheat sheet.
As voracious a reader, we can figure out, is it worth to pick up the book after reading the Dudley book notes?
There you go. So
dude, this is perfect. I'm going to be sitting at a ball field tonight, and I'm going to download that stuff and have it with me for when my kid's not up at bat or in the field. So I'm excited. This just made my day.
Thank you. All right.
Awesome. Chad, thank you so much for being with us, folks. That's going to do it for us here on the Law Firm Blueprint. Of course, you can take us anywhere you want to go by joining us and downloading our podcast to take on the go. Of course, you can be with us in our Law Firm Facebook group, the Law Firm Blueprint, where we go live every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. That's going to do it for us. I'm Jay Ruane. He is Seth Price. Bye for now.
Thank you, guys.